Welcome back to Hindsight is 50/50. This is our sixth episode. I am the host, J Rod, with my co host, the ORG, the old retired guy. Dad, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. It's a beautiful fall day in Michigan. Yeah, just I
Just
love.
enjoying it, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's things you do to get ready for the winter. I love fall because of football season, but I don't like fall because then I know winter's coming, and the older I get, the less I like winter. But I just kind of roll with it. Keep enough. Keep enough wood for the to have fires in the fireplace, and you
Oh,
know
yeah.
I
I love fall weather. I really do. I
right.
love hoodie weather, but I do not like a Michigan winter.
Well,
That's
they
rough.
didn't used to bother me, but as I've gotten older, they do.
Yeah. I get that because even as I've gotten a little bit older, it makes me more sore, and I feel like I'm more susceptible to the cold now than I used to be. But that's why like October for my family, for my immediate family, we're just crammed with stuff. We're constantly busy, and it's because you're trying to do every little thing before the winter hits because you're going to be either isolated inside or playing in the snow, but there's not really any other fun times outside. So
Well,
we
and you guys, with little kids, you and they're, your oldest is going to be 3, and it's just they're just starting to really get into Halloween, and I mean that's a big deal. Plus, you have your wife Melissa's birthday, you have JJ's birthday, your oldest, and
yep
then your anniversary all this month plus Halloween, right?
yep yeah, we do.
So,
So again, that's we've got the birthday with JJ, but we've also got his birthday party on a weekend with everybody.
right.
Um, and then it's, balancing Melissa's birthday and not letting it get absorbed into our anniversary is also another one of those, fine line dances. Um,
Right.
but Halloween and all that, we have, Halloween around here. We have the pumpkin carving stuff. We go to probably 3 or 4 different orchards throughout the month. We still have 2 more left on the list. There's these kids' days and all this fun stuff that you get to do. But even just Halloween itself is going to be exciting this year. And it was a little bit time consuming with us finding the right costumes. But we are going to have a Jurassic Park theme in our house. So
Yeah, I
the
know. I know JJ's into dinosaurs. That's cool.
yeah,
I
he's going to
mean,
be a T-Rex.
yeah. So, in see where we live. I mean, we've never had a trick or treater since we've been here. We've been here over 20 years. We're out in the country, and number one, there weren't a lot of kids, but even the ones that are out here, we're just so you're so separated from your neighbors. We don't have that kind of stuff. When you guys were of that age, I know that we took you into the little town Manchester, and they did kind of a street vendors, like all the vendors gave out candy and stuff, and it was very structured and organized, and it's like you can be there from 5 to 7 or whatever, and you know, um, all the local merchants were participating. But I admire the people that make a huge deal out of it, that put up all the decorations, and because there's a lot of
The thing
people
this
that
year is like
do.
50-foot skeletons. That's like the
Yeah, there's a
trend.
lot of people that do way more for Halloween than they even do at Christmas time.
Yeah,
We're not big on doing much or anything outside for either.
I
Um,
with as
Nobody'd see it.
crazy with as crazy as the world is today, it's like a lot of people aren't comfortable with trick or treating anymore. And there's always been those scandals
Yeah.
of people putting stuff in candy and all that, but everybody's just a little bit skeptical, and you just got to stay safe. And what I like is what a lot of parents have done, whether it's for schools or whether it's for like a cul-de-sac. And I know some schools do this now because you can kind of like have a sanctioned event, but the parents pull up and it's like they call it trunk or treating. And you go around and it's like you get either a big parking lot, or if you live in a subdivision, they do it in the cul-de-sacs in front of everybody's houses. Um, and essentially you pop open the trunk and you have like your candy and your decorations on the back of your car.
Oh, okay.
And it's so that like even the kids who don't have an opportunity to participate like in a small town walk around or whatever, they can still do it. And especially in a bigger city, they can do it with just people they know in a safe way.
Well, yeah, and that's a good thing. Now, you mentioned what your anniversary and Melissa's birthday are 6 days apart.
Yes.
So how are you going to separate that? I mean, how are you celebration wise? I mean, are you doing something special on her birthday, or is that a surprise that I'm
No,
not supposed to ask?
no. Typically, that'll be something like breakfast in bed and whatever president is. It's a little bit, smaller, but it's just making sure that like on the day of she feels it's special on the day of, and not like it got blended into the days in between. Or in the past she's wanted to like do something big for our anniversary, and I was like, well, then we can't afford something for your birthday 6 days before, so it's been kind of absorbed like that. So just making sure there's a small gift and a sense of recognition on her
And you
birthday. It's
treat
just how I
treat her
accept it.
nice on that day, as opposed
Just
to
on
other
that day.
days.
The rest of the year, the rest of the year she can fuck off. But
So what? But don't you guys go to the place where you had your first date on your anniversary?
we
Haven't you
do
done that
typically,
before?
yes. We
Are you doing
typically
that
do
this
that.
year?
I do not know. We haven't talked about it yet. So I would not be surprised if we did. It just comes down to how much time we have. I know mom was willing to watch the kids. I don't know
Yep.
exactly what the plan is. If it's, for one night, then yeah, we probably will. If it's for 2 nights or whatever the case may be, then we might take a little mini vacation and go stay at like a bed and breakfast or something.
Oh, okay. Cool. No, it
So
sounds like
that
fun.
part's still up in the air. We really, I mean, that's the one thing that I'll give her credit for. She's pretty good at going with the flow and playing it by ear. So
Well,
we
and
don't
thank
have to
God
get
that we
locked
have
in.
wives that and or girlfriends and or significant others, however you want to put it, that take over the most of the organization of
Yeah, no
such
shit.
things.
Oh, did that fall through the crack? Don't care.
Yeah. There was, we went to a really nice wedding. I think I mentioned it. One of my buddies, his son Nick, got married, and it was at a beautiful country club up in Northville. It was really nice reception. And at the wedding, they had this little card that they gave you. It was kind of like a program: who was officiating, who the groomsmen are, the bridesmaids, etc. And then it had different things in there about the bride and the groom. It said, first date, you know, and it said where it was, and it's like first vacation together, and it said where it was, where he proposed. And they're both avid golfers. He actually proposed to her at a golf course in Wisconsin. But one of the things that I thought was just really cute, it was a pie chart, and it said, and the key was everything in white was all things that the bride had planned. And then everything in dark was things the groom had planned. And it was like a hand on a clock.
Yeah.
Which that's how most of them are. That's how
I
most
mean,
of
yeah,
them are.
you're sitting there like if it's a written out list, it's like how to put on my suit that day.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all,
Well, you remember my wedding. It's like we're sitting here and people are calling and checking in, and it's like, how you guys doing? And it's like, yeah, we're about, an hour to kick off. Guys, we should probably get out of our boxers and get
well,
dressed.
I remember we had to roust Bill. He was still chilling. And he was like sitting around his underwear.
Well, and then we leave, and I go, hey guys, we got to turn around. And
Mhm.
Jacob's like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm supposed to hand Melissa this little note thing she wants to do, like where we exchange a note before we get married behind a door where we can't see each other." I
Right.
forgot it.
Nice.
So we turned around and we still were there on time. Well, you remember Joe's wedding? Joe's wedding. We're an hour and a half to kick off, and it's like everyone's like, "So, what are you doing for your speech? Do you have it?"
I do remember.
And I was like, "No, I don't have it." And you guys
I
all look
do
at me like, "You
remember.
don't have your speech? I haven't written it yet."
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I don't remember any other snafus. I'm sure there probably were at Jacob's, but I remember the one was that, you know, my buddy Alan did all your guys he officiated all your weddings. And he had to, and I mean, they came from far away. I don't think it, when Jacob got married, I don't think they were in Mexico yet, but they were going soon. By the time you got married, they were in Mexico. They were living there.
Yeah.
So they were in Dallas or whatever, and he had to fly in. But I remember it was like he had to sign the license. He didn't sign the license. And there
Oh
was like this
no.
mad panic, and the concierge at the hotel, helped somebody go in there and find it and get the license so he could sign it before he left town, and that they could have it. So yeah, there's all those things. There's always a surprise here and there.
I remember doing that, maybe Alan didn't sign it, but I remember like none of their paperwork was done the day of the wedding, and I was having to like run back and forth between like the girls' changing rooms and where the guys got ready, which was the hotel, and having to try and find this paperwork. And I don't know if that's when Alan signed it or not, but it's like I remember that being a nightmare, and it's like I understand I'm the best man here, but I have no idea what you did with your paperwork.
Right, right.
Like,
It's
I
things
just got a
happen.
kick at Joe's wedding about everyone being all high strung that I didn't have my speech written.
Well, I know I wasn't real happy. It's like, come
Hey,
on, dude.
it came out great, didn't it?
It did. You did it. You did a
See?
nice job, but it was like, that's something that, because so many people, I've always been lucky. I even at the last minute, I could think on my feet, and I'm not afraid to talk in front of people. Public speaking doesn't bother me. So that happened at Jacob's wedding. I wasn't supposed to say anything. I mean, we had talked about it. They didn't necessarily want a blessing. They didn't, there were other people that were saying things. Best man, maid of honor. I think Jennifer's dad, I remember him speaking. He had a very good speech. And I wasn't going to say anything, and I was fine with that, you know. And then the DJ says, "And now we'd like to give the microphone to the groom's father." It's like, "Oh, okay." So
Yeah.
it was
Thanks for the
fine.
heads
I
up,
mean,
guys.
I didn't, like I said, doesn't bother me, but lots of people would panic,
Well,
and
that's
I
how
get
I
that.
am about the speech is that like if I write it early, I'll critique it and correct it so many times that it won't be the same speech when I'm done. And I think that speeches like that, we're not talking about business, we're talking about a wedding, right? It's like speeches like that, you would much rather have a stumble than to lose the feeling, lose the emotion. And so for
From the
me,
heart
it's like if I put it
is,
out at the
yeah.
last moment, it's going to be a genuine and honest thought.
From the heart is usually better. It is, and in cases like that, off the cuff. I mean, it wasn't a celebration by any means, but we did the memorial for my dad, and we. I remember I wrote things for you to say because you were griping and complaining about you knew what to say, but you didn't know how to say it. And so I wrote some notes for you, and you didn't use any of them, and your speech was fine. Um,
That sounds like
but
me.
but I had 3x5 cards, and because there were just certain things I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to touch on this, and they were just short notes to remind me of a subject. And I get, everybody's there. We're all ready. I forgot my reading glasses. I could barely see the cards. I had no
Ooh,
idea what was on them.
shit.
So it was all impromptu, and it was fine. It was fine. But I think, like, from the heart, lots of times is better anyway, even though for some people, like, you obviously didn't get nervous about it, but other people were.
Not at
Well,
all.
that's it. When we were at your house hanging out before the wedding, it's like, Bill, get dressed. Come on, dude. We got to go.
Well, I remember we went golfing, I think, for my bachelor party.
Yes.
And you're just like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And you're like, "I just don't think I've seen you this relaxed." And I remember looking at you. It's like, because I knew I made a good decision. Like,
Well,
it's one of the few things you get to choose in life where it's like, am I right or am I wrong? Like, you don't have to panic. You're like, yeah, she's awesome. I'm just gonna not fuck this up. Like,
well, there's a lot of us. I think I said in my speech that you outkicked your coverage,
oh
and
yeah,
most of us do. The lucky ones do. Let's put it that way. But no, it sounds like you got a busy month, and a lot of things going on, and
yeah. We got kids swimming every Tuesday too. So we actually have both the boys. I did want to touch on that real quick. It's been pretty cool. I've only gone to the first swimming lesson, but we'll have another one tomorrow. We have them every Tuesday. Um, but they're in separate ends of a pool. It's an indoor area that is heated and everything, so you can do it all winter long. Um, and like I sit in the lobby on the other side of glass in these chairs with some parents, but Melissa goes in the water with Jameson. So he's a year old. She goes in the water and bob the baby. Sometimes you like briefly dunk them, and then you put them on your shoulder and you play games with like their feet so that they think you're playing around when really you're teaching them how to float on their back in case they ever got in the water. So if a kid ever like got knocked into a public pool and you didn't see it or whatever the case is, his natural instinct is going to be to go to his back so that he can float because he
that's
can't
pretty
swim.
cool. Now, does Jameson? How does he like it?
Yeah. So at
That's
first
cool.
he's a little he's got like a texture thing. I think I told you when we put him in grass he cried, when we put him in sand he cried, all that stuff. So when you first put him in the pool he wants to whimper, but then he starts splashing, having fun right away. Um, And although he doesn't like stuff in his face, he doesn't cry as much as JJ did when you get like water in his face or up his nose. And so he's become accustomed to the water a lot quicker. He's just like, the difference between the two boys is that you're always going to get a smart thought and a lot of emotion and energy from JJ. And JR, typically he's comfortable, but sometimes he's unhappy and crying, but he's just like lazy across the board. So when you get him in the water and it's like, I'm not kicking my legs. We'll sink. I know you'll pick me up. Like that's just how he is. So um getting him accustomed to it and in the water right away was not that big a deal. He seemed to be having a lot of fun with Melissa, and then I got to watch um JJ on the other end of the big pool, and he was with an instructor and another little girl because they only have like, for that age there's only like 4 kids in the class at a time, and they do it at 2 separate ends of the pool, so that way it's 2 kids, 1 teacher, so that the parents aren't out there and this is the first time that your kids don't have floaties.
Okay.
So that they want the kids to not only trust the instructor and only look at the instructor, but they also want the kids to bail themselves out and like instead of panic and reach for mom and dad. So they show them how to get their feet on the side of a pool and get their hands and climb out of any part of the pool. And then as they're learning to tread water, they have these stands that are underwater for the kids to stand on, but the platform has a bar where the instructor then moves it. And the kids learn to tread water and float on their back a little more efficiently and actually even swim out of a pool on their back. So all of these things, they're very cool because your kids get to go in nice warm water. So because you don't get to go outside in the winter and fall that much, but also a good majority of it is going to be like the survival instincts. Yes, they're learning how to swim, but it's very much on how not to drown, if that makes sense. So
No, that's good. That's good.
It's
Now,
really fun to
JJ
watch.
gets enough pool time, though. I mean, he should be pretty good, right?
So yeah, I mean, he's not used to not having floaties yet. So like his kicks and stuff are underpowered, but he is leaps and bounds ahead of the other kids. I mean, most of the other kids are, sitting on the ledge, refusing to go in the water, or they'll just watch, or they don't do anything. And JJ's like the one that wants all the attention from the instructor. So he not only is the guinea pig, but then the only one actually doing it the entire session as well. So it's more than worth the money for us. For the other kids, I'm sorry, but I'm just happy I don't have that kid that's sitting there pouting, wasting my money.
Yeah. But, and those leg kicks, that'll straighten out. That kid's got coil springs.
That's it. Is with the floaties, it straightens them up, right?
Yeah.
So because he's had floaties for so long, now that he's off, he has to learn to tip forward to be able to swim, like because he's so used to being upright. So
yeah.
But another good thing, just for anybody that is out there and will be around the water and is potentially having a baby in the future. Another big thing about someone like Jameson's age, a year or under, about those swimming classes is how them learning to put their head back and trust it to float in the water. The other reason that's huge is because when you have a small kid in a life jacket, like on a boat, the life jacket acts like a bobber. And so if a small child falls in the water, there's a 50% chance that it tips him to his face instead of his back. And he can't turn over, right? But if you have a kid that knows as soon as they hit the water to put their head back to float, that vest will do what it's supposed to and bounce them while they're on their back. And so, I mean, just, I'm not trying to be morbid or anything like that, but those things, I never even thought about it until I started seeing all these like lessons and all this stuff. And it's very cool. It's very informative.
No, that's cool. That's cool.
I know I kind of drugged that out, but I did want to touch on that real quick. I like it. But yeah, October is a very, very busy month for us. So, and that's excluding sports.
Right. I mean, I knew it was, and he had some things going on. But yeah, and then there's, football. And, we talked about the last podcast, we talked about Michigan, and their win over Maryland and you hate to, or I hate to, and I have to watch myself to keep from doing it. Wins in the Big Ten are tough, and I don't care. It doesn't matter. You'll hear NFL coaches say this all the time. To win in this league is tough, and I agree with that. And I think sometimes I lose track of that. So, we got the win against Maryland. It wasn't perfect, but it was efficient, and we won. I was grateful that when they went to Iowa, they didn't have to play at night, because that is a tough place to play.
Always.
And they always, Kurt Ferentz is as much milquetoast as any coach around. But you know what? You can't count those guys out. They're always hanging around.
They always have good linemen. They always have good tight ends. And when that shit comes together, that's tough to beat. I mean,
and they got two good tight ends again. And they usually have good linebackers. And this year they have an exceptional one. Sorry, that was my phone.
Mine's been going off too.
that Jack Campbell. I mean, he's an All-American, and he's like 6'5", he's 230. I don't know if he's going to play in the league. I don't know that he has the foot speed. but he's a freak as a linebacker, just physically. And he's a really, really good college player. And before we get into talking about, J.J. McCarthy and his performance, Blake Corum showed up again. He didn't have 30 carries, but he had 29.
Edwards was back, and that was huge.
He ended up with around 150 yards. Somewhere.
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, he's setting records right now.
But on 29 carries, and I know you saw the play I'm going to bring up. I mean, he had a bunch of nice runs in that game. He always does, and he's tough and he's strong and he's all those things. We talk about him being a 3-down back and a complete back. His last touchdown, I mean, he jumped to the outside because I think it was designed to go between guard and tackle. And he jumped.
It looked like it was a power off tackle, and we were kind of like in like a jumbo or goal line set, and they were in a similar defense.
He did. I mean, and he squirted through the hole that was there. It just, I don't think it was where it was supposed to be, but the hole was there. And this Jack Campbell he had a beat on him. And I mean, this is an all-American linebacker. He gave him a little
he shook
shimmy.
Him so fucking bad.
And he never touched him.
I mean, but it wasn't just not touch. It was like didn't come within 3 yards.
Oh, it was like your jock is on the ground.
Someone tied it around his ankles.
and that's an all-American linebacker.
Well, so that exact play, I paused it and I showed Melissa and I go, this isn't fair. I go, that's the best defender on the other team. And I go, this still isn't fair. That's how good Corum is. And I think even though he's getting hyped now, I think he's still underrated. And I showed her step by step. I go, they talk about how short running backs, it's like you wonder why a lot of the greatest running backs of all time are short. And it's because people lose them behind the line is what the theory is. And I'm like, you watch the handoff, and I did it frame by frame. It's like, okay, this linebacker's got sight of him. Now he doesn't. Now he's got sight of him. Now he doesn't. And then when Corum gets to the hole, I told her, I'm like, as a linebacker, if you want to get a hold of this guy, you have to square up. And the second that linebacker squares up, Corum switches his hips. And that's like, I know it's a little instep to juke him, but it really is as simple as he switched his hips and he froze that guy and took off. And it's like, I don't give a shit where it was on the field. That's a touchdown.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's fast enough to score.
But that freaking, again, it's like wiggle, but it's switching the hips. So it's not a sidestep where you lose momentum. It's like he uses your momentum and trying to stop against yourself by switching his hips, and then his first 3 steps, he just explodes. And I mean, I watched that play 50 times, and I loved it. I mean, that kid's got some juice.
And McCarthy is he's growing. You can tell he really is. He's growing, and again, we talked about it last week. He's obviously a gifted athlete. He can throw the ball on the run about as good as anybody I've seen.
I think he throws it better on the run than he does in the pocket.
I think he might too. He still struggles with, when to eat it. And he was really lucky that Donovan Edwards fell on that ball at the 5 when that was his mistake. But
he does try and throw out of hits a lot, and they have to train that out of him.
It's so tough to win. And even when you look back, you go all the way back to the Michigan national title team in 1997, and I remember that team a lot. They put a lot of guys in the pros. They had multiple guys.
That was Woodson, though, wasn't it?
That played in the Woodson was there. Brian Greasy was there. I mean, they just had a list of guys who played in the NFL and had more than a year or two in the NFL. But Dhani Jones was another one, just comes to mind. But they had a bunch of guys. Tommy Hendricks, lots of players that. And
Didn't
then
he play for
linemen.
the Eagles? Dhani Jones.
He did, but he played for the Bengals too. Yeah,
and he had like his own like Food Network or something. Like that.
Yeah. But then their O-line, they had Backus and Hutchinson, and and John Jansen was on that team. So there was a lot of guys, and that team being undefeated, they won games. There were some ugly games they played that year. I'm not going to remember the score, but I want to say it was like 28-21 or 27-21 against Iowa. And Iowa had no reason being on the field with them, but they played a great game. And Michigan, I think, got conservative and a little bit at times. I know that Iowa was hanging with them. My point is that good teams win ugly. And so even though that was a good win against Iowa, that was a very solid win against a team that can trip you up, especially at their place. And again, by and large, he looked, I thought McCarthy looked good.
So I think he is so skilled. And I was thinking about this since our last podcast when you and I talked about him. I think he is so gifted and so skilled. And we played such shitters at the beginning of the year that McCarthy was still one of those rare high school quarterbacks that can throw the ball, right? Because not a lot of them throw it real well, but he clearly could. But I still don't think he knew how to read a defense yet. And I think when we got to Maryland, it's like, oh shit, I got my athleticism.
There's more than
can't
just
get us
running
here.
around
I
here.
can't just throw it. Yeah. It's you could tell his pocket presence was off and all that because the first guy wasn't open, and if he took 2 or 3 steps to the side, the second guy wasn't open. He didn't know what to do. It was like for the first time, he goes, okay, the game can move kind of quickly when things aren't going your way. And so I thought that we saw a big turnaround where people are like, hey, man, you've got progressions and then you got to get the hell out. And it's like, did he do it perfectly? No, not by any means. But it seemed like he got substantially better and that he actually knew what he was looking at. I think he actually prepared for what the defense was going to come after him with because, again, they knew pressure was coming. They knew that they were going to try and shut down our run game, so we had to be able to throw a little bit. And I think him kind of getting shell-shocked by Maryland prepped him for Iowa to where it's like, I have to take this seriously. I can't just run around people anymore. The other thing...
You can't take that for granted. No, you can't.
The other thing that I wanted to see this week in college football, I know Michigan State's not very good. I know that they've struggled this year, but they are still a bigger school. So they're even when Michigan State's not good, they should handle a lot of teams like your Rutgers and like Maryland in the past. And I think Maryland is much better than this year than they've been in the past. But I wanted to see how that was because that to me, although Michigan State is not what they've been, that was a barometer of did Michigan really shit the bed against Maryland, or is Maryland a hell of a lot better than what they've been over, the past decade? And I think Maryland's a hell of a lot better. I mean, I think Maryland would kick the shit out of a lot of teams in the NCAA.
I think Maryland's going to win some games. I think the danger with Michigan State, whether they're good or bad, if you're a Michigan fan, to me, the danger with Michigan State is many times, even if they're not their best, you're going to get their best game.
They're going to jump up and bite you.
Game.
Yeah.
And, there was a year that Rocky Lombardi beat Michigan. And there's no way. And then he ended up transferring to Northern Illinois because he got benched.
Well, but I look at
you're going to get their best shot.
Yeah, I look at Michigan State playing Michigan the same way I look at Iowa State playing Iowa. Iowa State Cyclones are not typically a great football team. But there's going to be 1 to 2 times a year where that team comes up and bites somebody they shouldn't have, and usually Iowa's one of them. And I'm not saying they usually beat them, but they give them one hell of a game. And that's how I think Michigan State is against Michigan, is it's like whether you're dominating the season or whether you're awful, if you're going to show up and show out for one game, this is it.
Well, in-state rivalries are always tough. I mean, I think Texas is always overrated. And this year, Texas Tech beat them. And Texas Tech, with all due respect, I don't think they're not ranked. And
but Texas hasn't even been relevant since like Vince Young.
Well, but the world wants to make them relevant. That's why, if they
That's
win
like
two
when
games in
Michigan
a
went through their
row,
drought,
they'll
they
be
were still
ranked again.
ranked. Yeah.
And it's like, and they're almost always overrated
And
in my
I do
mind.
think there's a lot of bias there because, again, we all know about Texas football, but like I bring up Michigan and Notre Dame. There
Yeah.
have been seasons, Michigan, that we had about a decade where we were just terrible. And we'd be preseason ranked, or we'd win one game and we'd be in the top 25. And it's and Notre Dame playing nobodies and independent, no conference bullshit. They would have years where they were awful. And then they're getting ranked. And I'm looking, going, like Cincinnati's way better this year than those guys. Like these teams that are almost
It's the
excluded on the
brand.
bubble.
It is.
Yeah.
It's the brand.
But I felt like Oregon gets ranked all the time, and I don't think that they're worth a shit half the time. I mean, they were, what was it, the Chip Kelly like no huddle offense that I
Right.
just absolutely hated. But you know, the, speaking of just college football in general, I have noticed this year a lot of ranked teams losing to unranked teams, or lower ranked, whatever you want to call it, closer to 1, losing to higher, like closer to 25. And I don't know if I just have more of a focus on it this year, or if we're starting to see what the NIL deals are going to do for spreading out the players.
Well, I think it's not only it's that, but I mean, I think that will have a greater impact. But I think it's also with the amount of TV exposure that a lot of schools get. Like you can play in the MAC and get lots of TV exposure. You can play in the Sun Belt and be on TV a lot. So I think there's a lot of factors, but I agree with you. And my point, I guess, about that would be, I think it's really hard to rank teams. Georgia, Missouri gave them all they wanted. I think Georgia had to sleepwalk through that game because I really do believe, and I think by year end this year, you'll see it again. The two best teams in college football are Georgia and Alabama. I think that now, but again, good teams win close, ugly games. Georgia just did.
And Missouri will have seasons where they do this too.
And they jump up. Yes, they can jump up.
And sometimes, like I think they have this year, and I've noticed this. This is one of the schools. I don't know if it's guys that want to play every down, and that's why they don't go somewhere like Alabama. But they will have monstrous D linemen. I mean, yoked, and it's like, and they'll have a guy who looks like a monstrous DN, and they're putting him at D tackle, and now he's causing problems in the back. I mean, like JJ Watt-esque build, and it's like he looks like he should be at DN, but they put him at D tackle because he's going to get pressure. And I felt like they did that to Georgia. And the one thing that their coach talked about nonstop, and I think that Georgia's going to see this the rest of the year, because this was in an interview with the Missouri coach. They said that they knew, because of Stetson Bennett's size, that they didn't have to cover everybody. They had to get in the throwing lane so he couldn't see. And so if you pause that game several times, there's defenders that once they see his eyes, they're just plugging a hole in a zone with their hands up so he can't see.
Yeah,
I thought it was such a good game plan.
And I think it's the best conference in football.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a lot like the Big Ten. I mean, Vanderbilt struggles. Vanderbilt will jump up now and then and be decent, but Vanderbilt struggles in football, certainly, and in basketball too. But in football, they certainly do. But almost all of those other schools, whether it's Ole Miss or Mississippi State or South Carolina, or Tennessee or Florida,
Texas
you go to
A&M.
their place to play them, you better strap it up, because they're that isn't. There's no walkovers, and I think I think Shiano's a good coach at Rutgers, and I think he will bring Rutgers back to a level of respectability. I don't know that they're there yet. They got trucked by Ohio State, but I think they were 3-0 going into that, maybe 3-1. Doesn't matter. But you got Rutgers who is struggling. You got Northwestern, who seems to be kind of like the Vanderbilt of the Big Ten, in that their academic standards are very, very high.
Yeah.
And but again, they'll put guys in the pros. They'll put guys in the pros, and they'll jump up and bite you too.
And I do think those teams tend to be underrated because it's like, okay, when you bring up Michigan, when you bring up Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Auburn if they happen to be good, LSU if they happen to be good. When you're bringing up these teams and people are like, yeah, but they just get their shit tossed by them, it's like, okay, but let's take out like the top 15 teams in the NCAA. And then let's take all of Division One and Division One AA football. I mean, there are a lot of like Maryland is this year. They beat most of them. That's how I look at Kentucky. Everybody's like, oh well, Kentucky's a basketball school. It's like, buddy, go put them in the MAC then, and let's watch them steamroll people.
Yeah,
because it's like that's not gonna. They get so underrated, and it's like you cannot just judge someone because they are forced to play powerhouses, and it's like it takes a lot to get throttled and come back the rest of the season anyways. But if you have to face one or two opponents that are going to throttle you like that, it's like, yeah, your team's probably not going to play their best football either. I think a lot of those teams don't get the credit they deserve, and it's like Arkansas. Arkansas, I know that they've been a little bit hotter topic this year, but they don't normally get all the credit they deserve. And I think they've slowly been getting better. And it's like they played Alabama and it was 28-0. Well, then all of a sudden 28-7, 28-10, 28-17, and they started coming back. And then I told Melissa this. I said, unfortunately with Alabama, you got to have 60 minutes of great football. You can't have 12 minutes of great football. And she's like, what? And then we turned the score on and they beat them, like 50-something to 17. And it was already in the fourth quarter when it was 28-17.
Well, when you look at that league, the SEC, and you look at the Big Ten, and I compare them, I do think the SEC is the better league, but not by a lot.
Across the board, or as far as their number one?
I'm just saying in general, across the board,
I'd agree with that.
from team to team. And unfortunately, and if you look at the national title champions for a while, more often than not, they're from the SEC.
Well, I think the SEC's number
Clemson's
one,
in there,
number
but
two.
iron sharpens iron. So when 100%. Northwestern is playing Wisconsin and Penn State and Michigan and Michigan State and Iowa, they're bound to get better. And they know what tough games are. So, and I think it's the same way with SEC schools. Like South Carolina, they haven't done a lot since Spurrier left. Well, but they play in the SEC. That's pretty tough going. Mississippi State beat A&M.
Well, I think that's a lot of the push for. I know it's TV deals and all that, and the money the school makes to merge into a new conference, but it's like a push to get into the Big Ten, or the SEC, or whatever the case is. I think a lot of those big pushes, separate from the money contracts and the TV, I know that's the leader, but separate from that, I think a lot of it is that they want to guarantee you on their schedule. I mean, like, think not everybody's happy to be.
It's big paydays.
I know that, but not everybody's happy to be, Boise State, where they can go undefeated 6 years in a row and nobody considers them a good team. They want to put a contender in their schedule, because if they have the season to beat them, if they get better by playing you, then they can start going for the national championship or bowl games, which makes schools even more money.
Yeah,
So I really do think that. I think strength of schedule and opponent is a big reason for, again, I know money's the leading cause, but to get sports fanatics to support your idea of merging into a new conference, I think a lot of that is the quality of opponent.
well, sure it is, because the quality of opponent drives up the money.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, they walk hand in hand. They do.
Right.
They do. You know, you get better exposure with quality of opponent, and you get more money because you get better exposure. They walk hand in hand, I think. I want to talk about the Lions, but I want to talk about them for only a little bit because it sickens me.
Well, let's start with the obvious. They lost, and from what I saw, 48-45.
Yes. Both
Against the
teams had over
Seahawks.
500 yards of total offense. Hawkinson had 179 receiving
So
yards.
did
He had
anybody play defense? Or?
No. Okay. The Lions, like I said, I don't want to talk about it for a long time because I'm so pissed. You know, I've been a Lions fan my whole life, and it's just a thankless job because more often than not, they just plain suck. I really like their coach. I like their GM. I think he's a bright guy, but I'm starting to hold him accountable too. You know, our kicker, which I don't think he was anything great, he pulled his groin. Well, the Lions bring in a kicker. Okay. So this is his first NFL game. Seattle first drive walked right down. I only watched the first half and the first play of the second half. Then I was fed up. But Seattle on the opening drive walks right down the field. I mean, they did whatever they wanted. It was a 6 or 7 minute drive, as I recall. It was a long drive, deliberate drive. They're up 7-0. The Lions come back. They go down. It's 7-6. Our kicker missed the PAT.
Oh,
so it's 7-6.
Well, that's
so
why they're
Seattle
not a
goes
chip
down and
shot
scores
anymore,
again.
right?
Seattle never punted in the game, by the way. Seattle never punted. The Lions punted 3 times, and they faked a punt and were successful on a 4th attempt. And they converted on 4th down. So it's like 14-6. Anyway, it gets to the half. I want to say it was 24-15. Um,
15?
And we scored to make it 15. We scored like with no time left on the clock on 4th and goal. We had 1st and goal with about 40 seconds left, and we had all of our timeouts. And 1st and goal, and I'm not kidding, a foot away. Now, DeAndre Swift didn't play. Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't play. DJ Shark didn't play. We had 2 linemen out, lost another one during the game. Tracy Walker on defense is out, and the defense was already bad. But
my
1st
God,
and goal,
how many yards of offense would you have had if you had Amon St. Brown and Swift?
Well, 1st and goal from 1 foot away. And all of a sudden, it's 4th and goal from 1 foot away, and we called our last time out with 2 seconds left. And Campbell, as has been his nature, goes for it, and they make it. So it's 24-15. The guy comes out and he misses the point the other way. He first time he pulled it, this time he pushed it. In between there in the first half, after one of their scores, he kicked the kickoff out of bounds.
They had gotten a field goal already.
Seattle got it at the 40 for him kicking it out of bounds.
But so hold on. So we scored a touchdown. We missed an extra point. Then we kicked a field goal. And then we scored a touchdown, missed an extra point.
Yes.
And then we kicked off out of bounds.
somewhere in there, we on one of those scores, we kicked the ball out of bounds. Seattle got it to 40, went right down and scored. So then, I mean, I'm frustrated, and I'm so pissed over this kicker. I can't think straight.
Could we? I mean, somebody's got to be able to pull.
Jacob Sawyer could have gone there and
minutes.
put cleats on the sidelines and kicked better than.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Pull somebody out of retirement for a game.
Well, so in the second half, the Lions had deferred, so they get the kickoff in the second half. I don't think it was the first play, but it was the first series. Goff threw a pick six. So now it's 31-15. And so the Lions played catch up the whole game. They never did tie the game. And they played catch up the whole game. Goff, even though he threw that pick six, he had a 121 quarterback rating. Geno Smith was like 135. The Seahawks never punted.
Geno Smith is their starter.
Well, yeah, I mean Russell Wilson's gone.
Geno Smith out of West Virginia?
Yes.
I didn't even know he was still in the league.
Oh yeah, and he's, the guy's made a lot of money, man. He's been in the league a while. He's been a backup most of the time, but he's been in the league a while. Here's my grievance. I told you when I saw our last preseason game and I saw how bad our two backup quarterbacks were, it's like, that's your GM's fault. He's got to have a better plan than that. Now, they went and got this guy. They picked him up off waivers, this Nate Sudfeld. I don't think he's been asked to do anything in the league. I saw him play when he was at Indiana University, but I don't think he's played other than mop-up duty in the NFL. He's been around a little bit. So I'm hoping he's better. And if you got to go to your backup quarterback, you generally have problems anyway. But to put themselves in that position, and then they did the same thing with a kicker. Now, I'm not saying you got to have a backup kicker, but you look at teams like
punter. I just don't understand.
Look at teams like Dallas. Dallas is a classic example. When their kickers get cocky and want to get paid, they get a new kicker. And he might be somebody that's floated around the league a while. He might be somebody who hadn't played in the league yet. You may have never heard of him, but he comes in and he's pretty good. And many other teams do similar things. There used to be stories about he was bartending one week and he was the place kicker for the Falcons the next. That's a true story. That happened. So when you're evaluating these guys, and not only that, not just those two things, our defense is epically bad. They did not punt. They had like 550 yards of offense. Rashawn Penny, I'm not going to say this. I can't say this for a fact, but I know last year when he played the Lions, he ran for 179 yards or 171 yards. And they blew out the Lions 55-25 or something. The Lions won 3 games all year. Well, I think that was the only time he was over 100 yards until yesterday. He ran for another 150. Jamal Williams for the Lions ran for like 150. We didn't have DeAndre Swift. I mean, they're so bad on defense. It's like the quarterback's playing a skeleton drill. Like there's nobody defending.
I don't know when he will go pro, but I already really hope the Lions pick up Edwards in like a late round pick when he goes for Michigan. You know who I'm talking about?
Edwards. Oh, Donovan?
Yeah. The running back.
Yeah, Donovan's only a sophomore. He can't go until after next year.
But when he goes, I hope the Lions pick him up. Because I think one of the things that we have not had, and I know we've got backs with decent hands and all that, but like we have not had that X factor out there that we use as an extra receiver to either break down the linebackers or to use on swing routes. And I know that we've used Swift more for that, but I mean, Edwards, his hands are so good. I think he would be one of those pieces for them where it's like, he's out there, man. As long as he can chip and help in protection, it's like, with as much as you're throwing the ball today, he'd be one of the best threats you could get.
DeAndre Swift is that right now, but he can't stay healthy. And he was like that at Georgia. He was a soft tissue injury waiting to happen at Georgia.
But I think
was brilliant in flashes, and that's how he is with the Lions.
But I feel like DeAndre Swift is what I would refer to as a wheel route running back, where it's like you can hit him for 50 on the sideline, but I think Edwards is what I would refer to as a high point back. Like he will go up like he's a big receiver to high point that football.
Swift is really good in space. Like he's really good in a zone. If you can get him the ball in a zone, it's trouble because and he's got pretty good hands. And I like Edwards too. I'm not sure he's all that yet. We'll see.
I just think he's all that as a receiving back. I don't think he's an every down back.
That's for sure. But this was such an embarrassment, and I'm trust me, in all my years of Lion fandom, I've had plenty. And it was so bad. And I after Goff threw the pick six, I mean, I'd look at the score on my phone, and I saw that we'd get it within 7 or 8. Like we made 2-point conversions in the second half to get it down to 7, and then they went up again. And they kicked a field goal. They were up 10, and then we got a touchdown late, and then they ran out the clock.
I don't watch enough of their games to know if it's strategy and not making adjustments or poor clock management or whatever the case is. But from what I've seen and from what I hear, read, what I've seen, I do feel like Campbell is changing the culture. Like we don't just kick 3 field goals a game. He is more gutsy and goes for it, but also, okay, we've lost the close games that are low scoring. We've now lost the close game that was very high scoring, but we're still in those games. Regardless of how much we fucked up, we're still in those games. And I know we've had years where we've done that in the past, but it just feels different. Again, I don't watch enough tape to know if it's their scheme or not, but it really just seems like we've got the right guy to motivate us and turn this team around, but I don't think we have all the horses yet. And maybe we focused on all this offense, and now it seems like we've got a fairly prolific offense, but
I think we lead the NFL in scoring. I think in points, I think we lead the NFL.
I know that in like week 2 or 3, they led in scoring. They were second in most total offensive yards. They were third in rushing, and I think they led in first downs. I mean, it was when you looked at our offense, it was ridiculous. And then when you looked at how many points we scored, it was ridiculous.
Well, yesterday in that game, both teams had 27 first downs. I remember that stat. But the Lions have scored 35. Let's see. 36, 24, and 45. And then,
hold on. So you said 35.
They're averaging 35 points a game.
But you said 35, 36, 24, and what?
45. They're averaging 35 points a game.
So 140 points on the board.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now we don't have a Hansen or a Prater.
Yeah, and we don't have a defense. And again, I am going back. I'm calling foul here on a couple of guys. Aaron Glenn's their defensive coordinator. He was a great defensive back. I mean, he really was. He's kind of short. He's like 5'9", 5'10", super fast. Had a long NFL career. He played at Texas A&M with Dan Campbell.
Who do you play for in the league?
The Jets for a long time, and then I think he went, and he was a high draft pick. And I think he bounced around a little bit, but I think he played with the Jets for quite a while.
Did
But
he ever play for the Texans?
I'm not. He might have. I don't think so, but he might have. But anyway, he was getting a lot of love in the off season because he made chicken salad out of chicken manure with what the Lions had on defense last year. And he got interviewed for a couple head coaching jobs. Well, I'll tell you what, he might be interviewing for another job soon if he doesn't figure something out, because you score 45, you should win.
Every time.
That's shameful. You average 35 and your record's 1-3. Give me a break.
Well, I look at it and maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but my philosophy has always been 28 plus. That is, if I was a head coach, I'm going to tell my offense, you need to score 28 plus. And as a defense, it's like, of course, we always want to shut them out. You need to hold them under 28. Every team's going to get the ball during the quarter, okay? We're both going to have possession. There's no way you possess the ball for an entire quarter. So that means each team gets at least one shot to score. If we can do a touchdown per quarter or stop a touchdown per quarter, we should win a football game.
Well, again, just the simple math. You average 35 and your record's 1-3. That's ridiculous. That's just ridiculous.
What does that mean for the back half, though? Are we one of those teams that lost some of the ridiculous ones, but second half this season, now we win 7 straight?
I don't know.
I do
done? Think the culture is changing. I really do, and I think Campbell's doing that. But I'm pointing the finger at our DC, and I'm pointing the finger at our general manager. It's like, if he needs better players, that's your job.
Well,
if he needs a better scheme, that's his job. And right now, we don't look like we have either one of those things. It looks like we have bad players and a bad scheme. Well, we didn't have a sack. Seattle only had 1, but we did not have a sack. I think we had 3 quarterback pressures in that game. And it's and this is Geno Smith, who a lot of people thought he'd be a first-round draft pick. I think he went top of the second when he was drafted, because he was prolific at West by God. I mean, they had, ridiculous air raid offense
behind him.
But, he has been, he's a journeyman quarterback. And he's been decent. I'll tell you what, I'd love to have him as our backup, because he's a whole lot better than what we have.
Well, I wondered this about the Lions, and maybe it's coming true, but I guess I shouldn't even say I wondered this. I feared this about the Lions this year and potentially next. When you have a coach like Campbell and you draft someone like Aiden Hutchinson, your identity is going to be grit and pure effort. And if the whole team doesn't buy in, you're going to chew up and spit out a lot of guys. And I wonder if I'm not saying we don't, or that we have a good scheme or we've got all the right players. I'm just saying, like, when you've got a coach that's tough like that, and then you have someone like Hutchinson who every week is going to become more and more of a leader and is going to go from that new rookie to the guy who gets on your ass about trying. It's like, I feel like you're going to get a lot of those guys who thought they could just go to Detroit and get an easy payday while losing. And they're going to find out that they don't want to play for a team that's constantly pushing them.
Well, that could be true. I don't think he's been around long enough to do that. I really do think a lot of the people buy in. I think Hard Knocks showed that. I think it showed that. Campbell says it, and Holmes, he doesn't say it, but he follows his lead. They're getting players that they believe are like that, even in the draft, even in the free agent pickups. They want guys that are not just good players. They're really heavy on intangibles. But right now, our defense doesn't have enough good players, or the scheme is terrible, or both, because we're just giving up way too many. We can't get off the field. Like, I've already said it 3 or 4 times. They never punted. That's the first time in franchise history of the Seattle Seahawks that they didn't punt in a game. That was yesterday.
That has
So
to make Geno feel good now that Russell Wilson's gone and he had that kind of game.
pretty disgusting. And Russell Wilson is not looking good at all. They got beat yesterday by the Raiders. And so I don't even know what's going on there.
I don't.
I don't follow it close enough.
It's
But
tough
yeah,
because he's had a good record. He's also had a shit ton of weapons and had a hell of a defense there for a minute. But I never thought he was a sustainable good NFL QB. I always thought that not necessarily a flash, but maybe like a blip, because he is short. He's got a good arm. He's clearly a smart guy, but he uses his wheels to get out, and it's like once the league starts to figure out, maybe it's a year or 2 years, but they start to figure out how to contain you as a mobile quarterback, even if it's not running, but just, rollouts, play action rollouts. I think it starts to change, and it seems like he hasn't been, the blip that he was a few years ago. And I mean, I feel like you're going to do the same thing with Jackson and Murray and probably maybe Hurts. I don't know. I haven't watched Hurts play enough, but there's a lot of that mobile quarterback that it's like, if we took a minute to sit and figure this out, we can shut that guy down. And then once they do, now all of a sudden you do have a quarterback who's short and can't see over the line. He does make a lot more risks, and players are not nearly as open because not every play is breaking down. The defense is shifting their zone over, or whatever the case may be. So, I didn't expect too much out of him from Denver. I think he wanted to do the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady thing where he goes somewhere, or Stafford thing, goes somewhere and wins, but I don't see it happening for him.
well, it sure doesn't look like that so far. At any rate, I didn't want to spend too much time on the Lions because it gets me in a bad mood.
Yeah, I mean, they've been bringing us down for how many years? But hopefully we'll start to get better, and maybe one day you and I will get to talk about them making the playoffs. But,
Maybe we'll enjoy it talking about them. That'd be nice.
Do we know how to do that? Like, if the Lions had a perfect game, I feel like we'd have to gripe about something because something's been wrong every game for so many years. I don't know if we know how to appreciate.
I'm sure we don't know how. It'd be nice to try and figure it out.
Right?
To have to figure it out. You had mentioned, I'm changing subject again now.
No worries.
But you had mentioned Allen stories.
Yeah, so as a new segment, whether we want to do it every other week or once a month, I thought it would be pretty cool to kind of get your take or your firsthand experience of whether it's Jeff or Alan, probably more with Alan, a funny story or a great memory that you guys shared together, because he's obviously a big part of our family, a big part of our life. But I know that early on in our podcast, we had talked about several stories you had with him. So I was curious if you'd be interested in maybe bi-weekly or monthly, just kind of giving us a small segment of an Alan story that you cherish or found hilarious.
Well, sure. We and there's enough of them to last us a while if we do them once a year.
That's good.
We've been, like you said, he's a big part of our family. He's been a big part of your guys' lives. He officiated all of your weddings.
Yep.
That's how important he is to us. He's been my best friend since we were 12-ish. And
I sent him the podcast, and he said
I'm
he'd
67, listen. So it's been a while. But he's always been a fun-loving guy.
Hold on, say that again. Say that again. He's been your best friend since you were 12?
Yeah.
So 55 years.
Yep.
Are you guys going to throw yourself an anniversary party one of these times? I think you should.
Well, every time we get together, we throw ourselves an anniversary party.
I'm just saying, like when you guys hit 60, I think we got to have like a blowout.
Well, you know, we have done so many things, and there's so many things that I've done that I wouldn't have done had it not been for him, because he either chided me into doing it, or we threw an idea out there, and then one year, and I won't belabor this story, but one year, because we had planned something, and this is when he still lived in Michigan. We had planned something and it didn't happen. I can't remember if it was a motorcycle trip. We did backpacking trips, we did canoeing, different things, but lots of motorcycle trips. And one year it just didn't happen. We both had kids and something didn't happen. So the next year I just said, okay, let's put our money where our mouth is. So we opened a joint bank account with his name and my name. And we each put $200 in it. And it was like, we're going on a bike trip next summer. And if one person backs out, the other person keeps the money.
That's awesome.
And
I love
neither
that.
one of us backed out. So, and then you had a few bucks to spend on the trip.
Yeah, you set it aside
200
early,
extra bucks to spend.
but there's an obligation there. That's awesome. That's
yeah, it's
such a good
accountability,
idea.
right? It's like everybody says, going to Weight Watchers. It isn't about, if you follow the plan, it isn't about the rah-rah meetings and all that. It's the accountability of going there and being weighed, each week. That holds you accountable. Well, this held us accountable. We ended up going, but there's just been a litany of things that, he's always a character. He's the kind of guy that if he and I were in a grocery store together, and you're walking next to each other and you go walking by somebody in the opposite direction, he'd peel off a quick fart, which made a lot of noise, and he'd be the one that would act like nothing happened. And I'd be the one who's going, "Oh my God." Just little things like that. Like he was always, and a lot of it was, many times it was like putting me on the spot. We were just kids. We were like 16, and we were in line at Cedar Point. There's a big long line for some ride, some coaster, and we're in line. And I mean, we're like 16 years old, and there's this dude who's a monster, like muscle shirt, just ripped, and he's probably 6'5", 6'7". And I'm standing there. I'm between Alan and him. That guy was ahead of us, and Alan like reaches around and taps him on the shoulder. And the guy snapped his head around and looked at me, and I go, "I didn't do it." He goes, "Sure."
Well, at least he was a good sport about it.
Well, yeah, he gave me this stern look, and I'm like, "You son of a,"
Yeah.
So I mean, there were things like that that happened all the time. We would, when malls were popular, there was a mall in Jackson that, you just kind of go there and hang out. Even if you didn't buy anything, you'd go to Spencer's Gifts because they had weird stuff and T-shirts and all that. But you'd just kind of hang out to see who was there. And his dad had a 1965 Mustang convertible. Well, Alan, he'd let Alan use that car, sometimes when we'd go out.
Hell yeah.
And so, nice day, top down. This was in the day of like hot pants, really short shorts. Like
hot
two
pants?
Girls walking into the mall, and I'm in the passenger side, he's in the driver's side with the top down on this Mustang. These two girls are walking in, shorts like disgracefully short. And he drives up next to them, and he is literally inches from them. and he slows down to the same pace that they're walking with my head right next to their butt. And he's just sitting there
What an
cracking up.
asshole.
He's cracking up laughing. And I'm looking, you're sitting down low in this Mustang. These girls look at me and it's like, hi, how you doing?
Hey, didn't see you there.
He's all the time doing stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I've gotten him back a few times too, but one of my favorites was we were in high school and there was a girl who was extremely homely. And it was very evident that she had a giant crush on Alan. I mean, a big crush. I'm not going to say her name, but she had a big crush on Alan. And I don't know how it came to, and everybody knew it. And we would like tease him about it. It's like, oh yeah, your girlfriend, but we never did anything in front of her. We're not cruel.
Right. You didn't want to hurt her.
We've had fun with him about it. Well,
yeah.
We're in the cafeteria line. And we're, mouths are going a mile a minute. We're talking all the time. And I happen to see that this girl is ahead of us in line. So I, as the line moves, I position myself so Alan's between me and her, but Alan's got his back to her. And, and he's talking to me. I reached around him, and I mean, I grabbed as much of a handful of her left butt cheek as I could. I mean, and squeezed really hard.
You really got in there, huh?
Oh, I grabbed a handful. And she snapped her head around, and she had this stern look on her face. She saw it was him. She never said a word. She just smiled.
Hey, stranger.
And he was like red as a beet.
Well, that's tough to embarrass Alan. So good for you.
Well, it is. Yeah, you got to. Well, that's why I got a handful. It's like you're not going to do that with a tap on the shoulder, but it's always been good-natured fun.
But just messing with each other, that's the best part. We all get some of that from you and Alan. Just watching you guys as we grew up. And when you were telling the story about him putting you next to those girls when you were riding in the car, one of those awkward moments that I got from Jacob, we were coming home from Grandma Sawyer's on motorcycles, just him and I. I don't know if you were staying behind or if you left ahead. And we're going through Grass Lake. And we come around this corner in the front of kind of like a rural sub, not like a cul-de-sac, but it's a bunch of houses on like a town street. And this lady had a garden up front, like a vegetable garden. And she had to have been 65 or 70. And she was bent over with a V-neck on, with no bra, and I mean great big melons. And as we ride by, Jacob toots his horn. So he goes, beep, beep. And then she looks up, and it's like, we're riding staggered. So now she just sees me driving by at like 20 miles an hour. It's like, hey, how you doing? I go, what the fuck was that? And he goes, honk if you like it. Mimi.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, unless she lives under a rock, she knew what the hell just happened.
Well, that's good. No, we would get, and we've done just lunacy, just silliness. Just a real quick one about that same kind of thing. I think we had ridden the bikes to Niagara Falls. We were like, we wanted to see the falls. We were in upstate New York, and all of a sudden we looked, and it's like, man, we're not that far from Niagara Falls. So, as we get to the border where you cross into Canada, you have to stop. Well, it wasn't like it is now. It's like then it was like, do you have any guns, knives, or weapons of any kind? Do you have any illegal drugs or anything like that? They just ask you and they let you through. Well, he's ahead of me, and I see him talking to this girl, this lady at the booth, at the customs booth or at the border booth, whatever you want to call it. And I can hear him talking to her, and he's going, this guy behind me has been following me for like 200 miles. And I don't know what he wants. Yeah. But on that same trip, and again, we had ridden so much, and we would get ourselves in these predicaments where you ride, all of a sudden, you got a 4-day trip planned, you get a day of rain. So that sets everything back. Well, we still were going to do what we were going to do. So now you got to ride harder. So you just get tired. Well, it got to be a joke of that who would beep their horn at the ugliest woman that we would see.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You're
whether it
get
was
canceled from this.
whether it was walking down the sidewalk or the oldest woman or whatever.
Yeah.
And
who can find the best slump buster?
And and as we're going, as it's happening, I mean, I look over and we're both cracking up going down the road. I mean,
I know where this story is going.
We've ridden for 12 hours, pretty steady all day. We're both tuckered, and we're still in Canada. And we got to get back the next day. We both had to go to work. And I mean, we had been doing this all day and just, cracking up over silliness like that. And then all of a sudden, he beeps his horn. And there's like a 9-year-old boy. It's like, what's the matter with you?
Just going through a drought.
I know. What's wrong with you? I
mean, I would have had to pull over. There's no way I could stop laughing.
So many times. I mean, you'd laugh for miles. I mean, you're riding miles and miles and miles, and you just and he beeps the horn. It's this little kid.
If only someone could tell that kid the story when he was a grown man.
Oh, I know. Oh. And I know again, and I know that's
in good nature. That's not a fucked up joke. That's
fine. Yeah, and that's all it was. And they didn't know. It wasn't like we insulted anybody. Sure. It was just amusing to us.
But I would have loved, like, if I was that kid. Just again, you got to have a good sense of humor. But I would have loved if, like, I heard this podcast and I was like, that was me. Now I know. I mean, that's too fucking good, though.
I mean, on that same trip, we were in London, Ontario, and he's done a few things on motorcycles that have been scared me. I mean, things have happened to me, but he's done a few things. I don't remember what he was doing, and we were going through this small town, and it's like a 2-lane road, and he was getting something out of his bag in the behind his windshield, and he clearly wasn't looking at the road. I looked over; he's like on the grass right next to the sidewalk, and we're like doing 45 miles an hour. It's just like, dude,
smooth fucking grass.
What are you doing?
Hey, over here. God.
Anyway, there's a bazillion Alan stories, and I'm sure that isn't funny to everybody. But I tell you what, I mean, at the time it was funny, and it's still funny to tell it. I mean, I think of him, and all the things we've laughed over, and
We gotta make like a meme video of someone beeping a motorcycle horn at like Opie or something.
I see. I didn't know that story about Jacob. That's great. That's
I'm not. He did that to me.
that's
I was in
fantastic.
tears. That was when I had the 850,
Yeah.
the Yamaha.
Yeah.
That was yeah, and we're riding with it, and I mean, like, to be fair, huge breasts. I mean,
Yeah.
enormous. Mimi, and you know how it is. You get into Grass Lake, and I don't know if it's 15 or 20, but it slows down
Yeah. It slows way down.
slower before, regular 25 or 35 speed limit. So we were crawling, and yeah, beep beep. And so I don't think we're driving away from this one. Oh man, that's
Oh,
good. That's good.
man.
I do think that's something we should include as a segment in our podcast. And I don't know how
Oh, there's a
frequently.
lot of there's a lot of Alan stories, and you know, sometimes I got him, sometimes he got me, sometimes nobody got anybody, but it was just funny. But yeah, there's a lot of those stories. There's a lot of those stories.
That's good. I look forward to to hearing more of them for sure. I mean, some of these stories I've heard in the past. I'm sure you'll come up with, or you remember some that I haven't heard. But either way, they always get me laughing. I mean, just the the genuine good nature fun you guys have is pretty admirable. So
Still make me laugh after all these years. I can repeat those stories, and they were so funny at the time. They still make me laugh. So that's a good thing.
Well, on that note, I'm ready to wrap it up. I don't know about you. Is there anything else you wanted to throw in there real quick?
No, it sounds good. I'm ready to go, and I'll try and as I think of Alan foibles, I'll make a note of them, so we'll try to get a few of them in there in the future. But yeah, that's worth it. But I'm good to go.
All right, sounds good. Well, everyone else, thank you again for listening. If you're new here, thanks for joining us for the first time. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you guys again next week. Take it easy.
Bye now.